welcome to Landscape Photography World, the podcast for everyone passionate about landscape photography. I'm Grant Swinburne and I'll be your host on this show, talking to landscape photographers about their motivations, likes and dislikes. Tim Mattimore, originally from New York, is an ex-creative director and photographer who now resides in the serene landscapes of Superior National Forest in northern Minnesota. Tim's passion for photography has taken him across the US, Iceland and Patagonia, where he captures the essence of landscapes and wildlife. His artistic journey reflects the blend of urban influences from his past and the natural beauty that now surrounds him. Living with his wife, Tim embraces the tranquility of nature, forming connections with the wildlife that flourish around their home. In this episode, Tim shares his journey from a bustling career in advertising to the peaceful life of a landscape photographer. He discusses the impact of his environment, the changes of balancing art with activism, and the sense of community he finds within the photography world. I hope you enjoy the show. G'day, Tim. Welcome to Landscape Photography World. How are you going?
I'm doing quite well, Grant. Thank you so much. Thanks for having me. I'm looking forward to our chat here.
Oh, same here. Thank you for spending some time with us and helping us get to know you a little bit better. Why don't we start there and get to know you a little bit better? Who are you and where are you from and why are you a landscape photographer?
All right. I'm in the United States. I'm originally from New York State. I grew up in the burbs of New York, about an hour and a half outside of Manhattan and New York City. I went on to study at a university called the Fashion Institute of Technology, which is a bit of a misnomer because it's not just a place to learn pattern making and textiles, etc. It's actually a pretty good school. It's got a good reputation for advertising and graphic design. I went there for my university studies and got a Bachelor of the Fine Arts, and I worked in the advertising industry as a creative director. Most recently as an executive creative director for a large advertising agency in Chicago. But I've lived in cities my whole adult life. So I lived in New York City, went to college there, then worked in New York for a decade after that. I wound up traveling to Chicago for a photo shoot. I had never been there, fell in love with that place very quickly. I love architecture, and it's an incredible city just jutting out of the landscape on one of our Great Lakes here in the States. So I moved there, then I moved to Minneapolis, then I moved back to Chicago, then I moved to Detroit, then I moved back to Minneapolis and back to Chicago. And now I live in the woods of northern Minnesota in the
Wow,
Superior National Forest in a
very nice.
tiny little cabin with my incredible wife.
Fantastic.
Um,
Sounds
yeah. I don't know, how this journey has gotten me here, but I'm grateful for it. So here we
fantastic.
go.
Fantastic. So, what does photography mean to you? And in particular, what does landscape photography mean to you?
That's a great question. And I'll tell you, I'll back up just for a second because I want to just talk a little bit for just a moment about how I got into this and I don't think that the story is unique. I don't think that I'm much different than anybody else, but I wound up, again, just a guy who grew up in cities who was used to urban sprawl, and I was not a photographer back in throughout those decades. I didn't have a camera. I never picked one up. I had no intention of shooting street photography. I wasn't inspired in that way, but I was working in a creative business, so I was hustling in that respect. But in 2018, September of 2018, a coworker of mine had recommended going to Iceland. He had been there, I think, 3 times, and he was going
Sure.
again. And I'd never had any interest in it per se. But I chatted with him quite a bit. And my wife and I wound up booking a trip to Iceland in September of 2018. And I said to my wife, I think we should get cameras. Shouldn't we get cameras? This is going to be epic, right? I don't know where we're going. So we did. We picked up, I'll never forget it. We went to a camera store called National Camera Exchange and picked up two Fuji XT50s, both of us. I think she got an
Nice.
XF100. I got an XT30, XT20 actually at that time. And we went off and we went on this incredible trip. And I was very much a fish out of water in the land of fire and ice.
Sure.
But I took some okay pictures. My wife, on the other hand, who has really no interest in photography, she's one of those people that just drives photographers crazy. She can point the camera at anything and all. I'm like, Jesus Christ, how are you? What are you doing? She's like, I don't know. I'm just. But anyway, I came back from Iceland and and not just me, but my wife, our lives had been impacted so much by that incredible place. You can see the birth of the planet in Iceland. It's, as most of us know, it's got volcanic activity, glaciers, the ocean. And so we were just blown away. And the people there were fantastic. And I think that was the birth of this love of not only photography. I wasn't really that into it after that trip, but I was in love with nature and landscapes and the beauty of it all. And I think that for me, that segues into what landscape photography in particular means to me. And I think it's a tribute in my eyes. What I'm doing is only just paying homage to Mother Nature and the
Yeah.
planet. That
No.
is all I'm trying to do. I didn't make these things. This is created by millennia and time and all these circumstances, and so many creatures and humans have walked the planet long before I did. I'm just pointing a camera and trying to capture a little something to share it with people because I do love the planet so much. Maybe that sounds a little bit tree hugger for some people, but I am blown away consistently by what I'm able to stumble upon and see in nature. And also what I love too about landscape photography and what it means to me is I'm not sure about you, but I spend so much time on my own that the people that I meet out there who are also doing the same sort of crazy shit that I'm doing, we're all doing. I've just found these amazing friendships and these relationships that I've built, and I get so much joy out of meeting people out in the field and on these trips. And you become fast friends because you're in the wilderness in the middle of nowhere with
Yeah.
just a couple
Sharing
other
sharing a
souls.
passion. Yeah.
Absolutely, yeah. There's a little bit of crazy, I think, in all of us. And you see a headlamp off in the distance while you're shooting the Milky Way somewhere, that to me is it's awesome. I just love it. So it's a thrill to meet people and
Nice.
to again just share the experiences and the beauty of the planet.
And is that why you're so inspired? Is it that meeting of people and the mix of that and the wonders of nature that you're seeing?
I think that's what drives me for sure. I think that I was out today. I'm home right now, obviously, but I've got a trip coming up. I'm going to go to another national park here in the States while my wife is traveling for business. It's the perfect excuse for me to get out of the house. Oh, you're going to be gone? All right, see you later. I'm going to gas up the truck and go. But I do the adventure is thrilling and it's always we do revisit certain spots quite a bit as
Mhm.
photographers, but I do like the unknown. I like going to places that are I've never been before, and I also like the aspect of the road trip because you just you can feel the the outside influences pouring in through the vehicle and pull over and take in those surprising moments. I do enjoy that quite a bit. One of the things that I think we're all just I think beaten down slightly, at least I am, by social media, and it's Instagram in particular can be quite challenging, and it feels like a job at times, like the
Yep.
continued just I feel at times it's like a conveyor belt where I'm just popping something onto it and it's sending it down the line, which is something I'm trying to avoid. But I do what I like a lot these days about photography and what I try to do quite a bit is to cheer on people that are coming up and share the great things that they're doing. Like I love to just keep people motivated and keep them going. That's one of the things that I don't need to comment on big hitters who've got a million followers. Like they know they're awesome, but
Yeah,
it's the
that's it.
folks just jumping in the ring who've got only 20 or 30 posts thus far. I love being a fan and a cheerleader for them because I know exactly what it's like.
No, I'm very much akin to you in that regard. It's something that not just online, but here on the podcast, I've had quite a few people with less than 1,000 followers, and I'm keen to talk to them, both A, to encourage them, but also to hear their stories and why they've gotten into it and why they keep doing it despite having millions of followers and so forth, and why they're sharing their art. I guess there's a lot to unpack in some of what you said, and we'll come to some of those things. But I guess on that social media front, it's something that I've always struggled with as well, is just trying to understand, okay, why am I doing this? And why does it sometimes, as you say, feel like a conveyor belt or a job? And
Yeah.
how do you get off? And I've tried to temper some of what I do and say, okay, it's okay not to post every day. It's okay not to look at it some days as well. But one of the things that I do try to do as much as I can is comment on those people that are up and coming and people that I've spoken to on the podcast that I'm a bit of a cheerleader for, and I'm really keen to see them succeed and get some kind of traction out there. And to me, that's what engagement in social media means, not sitting there waiting for accolades and people to come to me and say, oh, your work's wonderful and whatever. I know it's good. I know it's good enough. It might not be the best, but I still haven't taken my perfect photo yet. I don't think it exists,
Yeah.
but I still haven't done that yet. And one day I might get there.
Maybe, but yeah, I think that yeah, social media is it's extremely challenging. I don't think that again that I don't think we're unique in this. Like I think it's everywhere. It's what I think is sometimes my feeling on the matter, and this isn't a complaint or lobbying a complaint in any way,
Sure.
but it does feel like there is such a robust amount of talent out there, and there are some just incredible shooters.
Mm.
And I feel like it has become one of those, it just feels too easy now. So people just they don't feel the effort that goes in, I
Oh,
think, to
definitely.
industry because it's
Definitely.
just so, we have this overabundance hitting us in social channels and it just all feels like doable. I don't
Yeah.
know. And I think that is important to just recognize that. And then you're not really looking for the accolades any longer.
Yeah.
No one's here to pat you on the back. Do
No.
your work, find the joy in it, and then enjoy yourself. I think
And you'll find an audience of your own that they're people that are like-minded, they like what you do, and you can,
absolutely. And I think also one of the things that I'm trying to continue to remind myself of, but that I've learned recently is that you can take a break
Mhm.
from the app and just and back away for even like a couple weeks. And you're right, it is great to get on there and just support other folks, but I don't feel the pressure as much anymore to just post, oh, I got to keep a schedule going because I think it's just, I don't know, it's a pressure that I just don't really enjoy. And
Yeah.
I don't post subpar work. And I also don't want people to burn out on my feed. Like they're just seeing, like, ah, Jesus, here we go again. There's another one from Mattimore. Do I have to comment now? Yeah, I think it's okay to just pump the brakes a little bit and table it. And I think a lot of people are doing that these days, which I think is just healthy because the last thing in the world that any of us want is to feel that anxiety. And it gets depressing too. There's a reason why social media platforms and the internet call people users and
Yeah.
hit. It's all drug terminology. We're all just addicted.
Yeah. Psychologically, they spend a lot of money and time understanding what makes people click, tap, hit,
Yeah.
get their hit,
It's
what
obvious.
produces the
Just,
endorphins and what doesn't.
yeah. Like it's so obvious too. Some of the just photography, they're not crutches, but they are. It's just the algorithm loves sunrises, doesn't it? We love bright color. It's, of course, it is.
To be honest, I'm happy about because I do a lot of sunrise shoots
Me
because I'm
too. Me
on the
too. Me too. I love color. I love colorful skies. I'm huge on it. But yeah, I think that just you have to not fall victim to it and beat yourself up about it either. Because we're all just in that same camp where we've posted something that we're really proud of and we just love. And all of a sudden it just tanks. You're like, yeah.
I want to get back to your photography, but I'm going to do that in a second. Before we do that, I want to get your creative director take on something that really grinds my gears with social media, and that's
Yeah.
large organizations in particular trying to get free content. Now, I get why they're doing that because free content costs less than content they have to pay for. I guess the thing that annoys me, though, is the way that they take this privilege of the plethora of stuff that's there and try to use it for their own gain and without any. And it comes back to what you were saying before about no recognition of the effort and no recognition of the time and skill of the person that's actually put their work out there. It's, oh, I'm going to take that and use that for my own ends because it looks pretty or whatever, it matches my brand. And I'm interested from a creative director's perspective how you see that behavior.
I am of the camp that one should be paid for if things are being used for commercial purposes to make money for another, then you ought to get paid for it.
Yeah,
And I I've had imagery used in editorial and things like that, as well as for some tourism. And people have I've done it for the reasons that I just wanted to share my work more than getting paid. I've done it for free, but it's also doing it for free for the right people and for the right reasons for you. I don't think that advertising in general and agencies should ever take advantage of photographers without compensation or some kind of kickback on the back end, whatever it might be. But I think that you're right. It does go back to just feeling there's so much content out there. Why can't we just grab it? Let's just go snag it. And I don't think that's fair. I will say that I think for photographers in general, and I'm not a professional photographer, I'm not a person who makes his living doing this, sadly. I wish I could, but I do it as a passion and for fun. And of course, people ask me for prints and stuff, and I just do them for them. But the one thing that just is scary for me for professional photographers more and more is just AI, because
yeah,
God, the technology is just bonkers now.
yeah,
It's scary how good it is, having played around quite a bit on Mid Journey and stuff like that for other purposes, but it's incredibly scary. And that's, I think, why you get back to the question of why do we do this? And for
yeah,
me, AI is fantastic because you can create art. It's fantastic. It's so gorgeous. But to be there in person and feeling the dirt on your hands or the mist of the waves, what have you, that experience cannot be replicated through
exactly.
laptops.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. You can't do that tapping a few words into a machine to spit out a pic.
Ever. Yeah.
All right, let's get back to your photography, and I guess I'm interested in where you started to see it as art, as opposed to you picked up the camera to go to Iceland, and I'm assuming that was to document what you saw. Was that with an artistic intent, or was that less of an intent? And where did the art start?
I think it began there, and I think that was the intent. I certainly tried really hard. And again, I didn't study photography, and I there are photographers that I was very interested in, but they were more like the Nan Goldens and like that type of work, the grittier side of the cities I was living in. But there was an intent when I went there. I was trying to frame up the Icelandic landscape in the most beautiful ways that I could, but I
Mm.
knew nothing about lenses, and I forget even what I had with me on that particular journey, but it was probably like the 24 to 70 zoom that came. It was a kit lens, and that
Yep.
was it. So I was, though, trying to create some beautiful imagery, but again, I didn't have any knowledge going into it. But when I came home and I started to look at some of the work, that's when I think that it kicked in. Oh, there could be something to this. Like, I'm liking some of the things I'm seeing here. So I believe that, yeah, that was the birth of it. That was where the addiction for me began. I was like, oh
Sure.
wow, this is cool.
And do you have
So
a process now for creating or for setting creative challenges for yourself?
you know what? That's such a great question. And I think that again, this will be a personal answer, of course. I will probably always shoot wildlife and landscape. I don't really specialize in wildlife, but occasionally I'll see a
Sure.
critter around, and I do love creatures and animals. But I will probably always shoot landscapes for as long as I possibly can throughout the rest of my life. But I also find myself needing something more. out of what I'm doing. So I do have some planned things that I'm working on for, like, I want to set some projects up for myself.
Yep.
What a lot of photographers do. One of them, my wife is a very mystical woman, and she does tarot readings. The two of us have been discussing creating a tarot deck through photography,
Cool.
utilizing my wife as a model, and we live in the forest. Like, let's go get weird. Let's just go and get crazy out there.
Yeah, why not?
And I think that is something that is a little different for me because I get to work with her throughout the process and create it together. So that's a project. And then that I'm eager to begin with her. And it could take us years to do, which is just fine.
Sure.
But that's one project. And then I have another conceptual project that I'm tinkering about. I've been thinking a lot about of late. And it's nothing more than just a thought in my head, but I've always felt throughout my life, I felt a little bit like a fish out of water, like uncomfortable in my own skin, not really knowing where I fit in. And I like that aspect of contrast between just people who don't belong in these wild places. So I'm working on something right now that's a mashup, if you will, of a little bit of like street vibe, but out in nature.
Okay.
So documenting people who don't belong being out in the wild. I'm working out something in that respect as well. That could be terrible, or it could be just very, I don't know. Some of my influences are painters, actually, and
Yeah.
Edward Hopper, who a lot of us talk about because of
Yeah.
his just use of light. It's so incredible. I love his work, and I love what I like quite a bit are the featureless faces and the kind of ghosts that are inhabiting his canvases. And I just love seeing something like that and wanting to know more about that person and those qualities. So, anyway, that's a really long answer to creative
Oh, it's
challenges.
it's, it's great. I really like that idea of the people that don't belong. I see quite a few people, and you either on the coast or up in the mountains, and the way they're dressed just tells you,
Yeah, they have no rightful place.
you don't really belong.
Yes.
I remember a hiker was actually up in Yungala rainforest. So this is tropical rainforest in Queensland.
Mm.
And so one thing that if you've ever done hikes like that, it was fairly misty. It had rained the day before, it was fairly misty and whatever, so it was a little bit damp underfoot.
Yeah.
And one thing, if you've ever been in an Australian rainforest, particularly in the tropics, is you're going to get leeches.
Oh,
And
man.
we'd walked to the bottom, and my wife and I were on the way back up, and we'd been picking leeches off one another all through the
Oh,
hike.
man.
And we see this couple coming down the trail, and he's wearing sandals. And when okay,
Oh, man.
you're really not prepared for this war. So I warned him, and I said, you probably want to change your shoes before you go too much further, because we just hit the drier bit up near the top where the soil and leaf litter wasn't quite as damp as it was further down the valley.
I
And
hope that he heeded your advice.
no, I kept walking. I'm glad I
Oh,
didn't get to see his feet at the end of it, because it would have been a blood feast, I think, for the
oh my God.
little
I've
buggers.
never experienced leeches before, but
No, they're not fun.
I can imagine.
We spent about when we got back to the car at the top in the car park, and we spent about 10 minutes checking one another for where they'd got into folds of clothes and pants, and
Oh,
uh,
yes.
the cuffs of the trousers and the socks and around the shoes and all the rest of that.
Yeah, we have a problem in northern Minnesota of ticks, but it's not as bad as leeches.
Oh, we get ticks here, but yeah, they can be a real problem, but they're usually counted if you've got a brimmed hat, they're not such a
Yeah.
bad problem, and you cover up, you're okay. But yeah, leeches tend to get in and out of. I've seen them actually go through the air holes of a shoe. Yeah, how you have
Yeah.
air holes to help the shoe breathe. I've seen them crawling in through there and had to pull them out
Because
before.
they can make themselves really
Yeah, they can
skinny.
make themselves very skinny. Yeah, they're very
Oh,
unpleasant creatures. They're
survivors. They've been
something else.
around.
So
Yeah.
I just don't like being there.
Yeah. Oh God.
Anyway,
We'll get back to the leeches at a later
yeah,
date.
we'll talk about. I'm interested in what is being success in your work, in your photography. What does success mean to you with your photography?
I think, man, that's a really great question. I actually I don't know if I know the answer to that. And I think it's
Huh?
partially because not because I don't want to answer it or not because I don't have goals, but I think that like success, there's two different kinds of success, right? There's this success that is easy to imagine because it's money. That's
Yeah,
success, making some money. But I think the other kind of success is actually a little bit more interesting because certainly I would like to be able to sell photography, maybe
sure.
make books down the road and have people enjoy them. But that I think is less interesting than the success that I think that we're striving for out there. That just personally, I think there are moments I haven't really told too many people this, but I have told this analogy to some folks in that you don't even have to play golf to get this analogy, so don't worry about it. But I've played 5 rounds of golf in my life,
Right.
and I'm not a good guy. I'm not good at all, or else I would have played more. But I know the feeling of hitting a golf ball like it's on a rope and doing it really well. And you feel like, holy shit, I could play golf. Like I might be awesome at this. And then cut to the next hole and you're just
Yeah.
terrible and you're smashing your club on a
Yeah.
tree. But the feeling that you get from doing something really well just in an instant is something that I think I chase with photography too, because I have an addictive personality and I like the feeling of being in a moment that can never be replicated and doing a really good job of capturing not just what's in front of the camera, but I think what we're trying to do oftentimes is capture the feeling that we had in that moment. And so it's so much more than some rocks and water and clouds. Like
Yeah.
it
Yeah.
has to be more than that, in my opinion. There needs to be emotion and feeling, and that's what I'm always trying to convey. I think that for me is the success that I chase all the time. And gosh, those moments are so few and far between. But when you have something that you've created, that moment where everything clicks and it's beautiful, and you're ultimately really proud for yourself, man,
Mm.
that success is wonderful. Like it just feels so great. When you can't believe that you've made something, I think that's a great feeling.
Absolutely. Yeah. I think that's a wonderful answer to that question too. Well done. You mentioned that you kicked off photography in 2018 and that trip to Iceland. Since then, what have you done in terms of learning and mastering your craft? Is it all self-teaching or did you lean on mentorship or how did you get help in terms of trying to improve? Because you came away from that trip, as you said, and said, all right, there's some good stuff here, but there's also a lot of ordinary. How do I improve? That's to me, that's the impression I got from what you said.
It's absolutely true. Yeah. And I think that not immediately after that Iceland trip, but not soon after, I had pushed myself to go and try to find places. I was living at the time in Minneapolis in the
Uh-huh.
Twin Cities of Minnesota, which is a beautiful place. But I pushed myself to find nature outside of the city and I went after it. It's challenging to have to do that and drive hours and go on these trips and push yourself into it. But it was something that just it interested me so enough that I was willing to just do it and
Mm.
exhaust myself trying to learn. And I think that over the years, I'm self-taught, but I have to say that I learned a lot from watching incredible shooters on their YouTube pages, just walking through a bit of process and walking
Yeah.
through lensing and f-stops and ISO and all of that stuff is presented so wonderfully by some of the great content makers and great photographers who are out
Yeah.
there. One person in particular I'd have to give a lot of credit to is a guy named Mark Denny, who I
Yeah.
think a lot of us know, but he does wonderful videos. And he's also a person that I forget what he did for a living, but I think he was like a banker and he just quit.
Something
He was
like
like,
that.
yeah, I'm going to go do this. And I have enjoyed him so much because he's a humble guy and he's had success and failures. And works really hard at it, but he puts together like very easy to follow tutorials on everything. So I devoured his content.
Yep.
And I think that, gosh, I'm not unique in this again, but I'm always learning. Like even just it's just through failure, really, through screwing up. And how many times have we visited the same spot the course of 2, 3 days, just going back and trying again and again. I have to get this. So that I think is just the hugest bit of my process is just failing and being okay with it, which I could, if one thing I could give credit to advertising for would be that, because in the advertising business as a creative person, like 85, 90% of what you do never sees the light of day. It's just crap. It's dead.
Yeah. You
I
wouldn't
think
even show it to the marketing department you're trying to work for. You.
no, not at all. Yeah, this is garbage. Terrible ideas. And photography is like that too. You just fail over and over again. I think when I was first getting into it, a buddy of mine told me that he said something, yeah, 1 out of 100. And I was like, what do you mean? He said, you'll get one shot out of every 100 that you take. That'll be
Yeah.
okay. That'll be decent. And my numbers were way worse than that when I began. It was like 1 out of 500. I think I walked away from Iceland on my first trip with like 9,000 pictures, and I might have shared nine of those. It was like,
In terms of lifestyle, how do you balance your full-time work and your photography? Obviously, you've got yourself living in a place that's close to some wilderness from the look of the view out your window there.
yeah, that's an interesting question. And I think that so I had worked in the advertising industry for 27 years. I'm an older gentleman, going to be 50 in a couple of weeks, actually, which is terrifying because I do not feel 50. But I
I'll
worked
be in December, so it's not
nice.
that terrifying.
I'm not scared of it, but I can't believe how much time has gone by. I'm like, oh my
Yeah.
God. But so I was working in the business for 27 years, and my last job where I was heading up a creative department for a big Chicago agency was just, it was too much for me. I was beginning to suffer some pretty massive panic attacks. I was only sleeping, I had massive anxiety. I was getting like 3 or 4 hours of sleep a night. I was having blurred vision, dizzy spells, like it was mentally fatiguing, but then the physical came with that. And so I resigned from a pretty high position, a really good paying job as a creative leader. I resigned in December of last year from that job. And I've been taking the last 8 months now to travel, shoot photos, and just spend some time in nature, spend some time in this
Oh,
cabin that my wife and I have been renovating for the past year. So we were able to just move up here in December. I'm just trying to enjoy life and just reset and heal a little bit from the trauma that I had from advertising, and then figure out what's next. Figure out what I want to do and how I'm going to make some money. I did just recently get my drone license, so now I can fly commercially for people in that respect. So
nice.
I'm just trying to have a good time right now and see some national parks and shoot some beautiful photos.
So nearby, have you got a favorite spot that you keep going back to?
I do have multiple favorite spots, but they're all in one kind of area, if you will. It's a big area, but I live about 90 minutes or so from the North Shore of Minnesota on Lake Superior, and Lake Superior is our largest of the Great Lakes.
Yep.
And it's really just beautiful coastline and has lots of little nooks and crannies that I love. But not only the coastline of Lake Superior, but if you go inland near the coast, you've got incredible waterfalls. So it's just that whole dynamic of water feeding water. And I love
Yeah.
that area so much. It's gorgeous for night sky work, and you get to see the aurora up there on occasion. And so that's probably my favorite spot. And it is very much one of the favorite spots of most Minnesota photographers. So,
Nice.
yeah.
Do you think living there has changed the way that you shoot? It's obviously changed what you shoot because as you said, you've got the lake and the waterfalls, etc. How about how it's changed how you've shot?
I think that one part of the beauty of being able to live here in nature is that it's the best practice ground for other things. And I do think that the place that I live is it's extraordinary and it's beautiful. It at times is not the most photogenic. And I'm not saying that because yeah, I made some really shitty pictures, but which I have. But I'm saying that because we live in a forest that was very much decimated by the timber industry, so it's growing back, but it's really
Yeah.
gnarly. There's lots of invasive species. It's not like you're walking amongst the redwoods of California. It's a gnarly place to shoot. But I think that's really cool because it just challenges you so much. Like, all right, how am I going to frame something up? How am I going to do this? How am I going to get focus in a place that's just busy?
Yeah.
So I think that having access to that is huge for when I go out on the road because I'm taking those tools with me. Like, all right, I know simplification. Like, how can I make this thing just better in terms
Yeah.
of less is more? So that is a gift that we receive from this place. And I think that definitely helps my photography, but being out in nature is also, as we all probably know, and I don't need to profess, but it's got the best energy. It's super healing. Like I love seeing animals just I live on somebody else's property. It's I live on a red fox's property. Like
Yeah, right.
he was here before us. So we pay homage to the animals here.
Nice, nice. What's your most memorable photographic experience?
Oh my goodness. I will say that, yeah, the experience, the experience versus the image, I would say, are two different things because I had never really gone out on a trip with fellow photographers, but a couple of gentlemen who I've become friendly with, one from the west coast of the US and the other from the east coast, we all met up in Arches National Park in Utah
Nice. Yeah.
in May. And I had been there once before. It's a phenomenal place. It's like Disneyland made out of rocks. It's incredible. But I would say that shooting with those two guys who are just crazy, they're just the most insane, bonkers, funny guys. And we shot a bunch of Astro together. Being out in the dead of night with these
Yep.
two guys who knew each other for I've known each other for many years just listening to them give each other shit like the whole night. It was like a comedy show that I was just witnessing as we're underneath full, beautiful Milky Way above
Awesome.
us. So we were just shooting into the night, and I've never had such a fun experience in my life with those, except with those two guys. Yeah, but Utah, if you've never been, if anyone listening has never been, is one of the most incredible places. And the photography experiences there are just, it's mind blowing. And it's also so challenging to craft images there because the experience of being there is so much cooler than the photos could ever do
Yeah, yeah.
justice.
I always find that it doesn't matter where I've been, it always looks better in real life than the photos. They just don't ever do it justice, do they?
Completely. Yeah.
What about horror stories? Have you had any dramas while you've been out shooting?
Nothing too crazy. I do have some one of the weirder bits of photography for me is definitely shooting night sky stuff and going out doing Milky Way stuff. And I've definitely had a few strange experiences by myself out in the dark. In fact, I was in the Alabama hills in California and I was shooting the night sky by an arch called was it Mobius? Anyway, I was shooting one of the arches at night and pitch black, just incredibly dark. And I heard somebody whisper in my ear. And I was so freaked out. There was nobody there. It was like a ghost whispering in my ear. That was my biggest horror story. Yeah, I freaked. I have never walked so fast.
And
I
so there
had
was just
there was nobody there. It was just, I don't know, it was a spirit from the Native Americans or something. It was crazy. But other than that, one of my shittier moments was I went to Iceland for a second trip and I wound up smashing one of my lenses
uh,
at Kirkjafell for like second day there, just camera on tripod just fell into the rocks, just shattered my lens. So that was a bad moment.
that's no good. What has photography taught you about nature?
I think a lot of things actually. I think that one of the things that I am very much still learning, but I or being taught by Mother Nature is respect because I do a lot of solo stuff, and like I was just talking about, you have to watch out for ghosts. But I think there is there's danger to find out there, and I think that as beautiful as some of these images that on your feeds and come back, there's an element of danger that I think is very much I'm still in awe of, and I've had some moments in Iceland, actually, some slips there that could have ended really badly.
Yeah.
And I'll never forget watching the volcano erupt. And my wife and I were sitting together on a hill, and the volcano was just going bananas. And the two of us looked at each other. We're like, how are we going to get out of here if this goes wrong? There's no, there's no escape plan.
Yeah.
But so I think that, yeah, just respect for Mother Nature, for the elements that are out there. It can get scary. Certainly, weather is really can be terrifying. And
Oh,
I think with that, I think Mother Nature has also just taught me it's just to be in awe, to allow yourself to be in awe
yeah.
and make sure that no matter where you are, what you're doing, to walk away from your camera for at least a moment, but maybe longer, because what's in front of your face, it's like going to a concert and you've got a bunch of people with their phones filming it from them. What's in front of you is so much better than what your phone is seeing right now.
Your
So just
recording isn't
enjoy
going to do
that.
that justice.
You're never going to watch. I've done the same thing. I'm guilty of it as well, but I've never watched U2's Joshua Tree tour on my phone after I recorded it. But yeah, so enjoy the moments. And I think that, yeah, the respect aspect of nature, I think is, yeah, just be mindful, be careful, and be in awe. That's the beauty of it.
You talked about bumping into people. How often do you bump into someone out in the field?
So I bumped into somebody not this past weekend, but 2 weekends ago. I was actually down. I'll try not to make this a lengthy story, but this is one of the first times that I actually invited my wife to come with me.
Sure.
And I have my truck set up for car camping. Like it's got a mattress in the back and we've got all the supplies and gear we need. And I was like, why don't you come with me? I'm going to go shoot this meteor shower down on Lake Superior. And
Nice.
even though she had to work, it was a Sunday night. She had to work on Monday morning. She was like, yes, let's do it. I'll make it work. And we went out together. And so we went down to the shore. And I'm such an idiot. And I know everyone's going to just laugh at me, but I went down for this Perseid meteor shower thinking, oh, this will be really cool. I'll just lock off a spot. I'll shoot a bunch of meteors. And my wife and I were waiting for darkness to fall. We were watching a movie on net. And I just opened up the car door and I looked up. And at first, what I saw, I thought was cloud cover. And I was like, shit, the clouds are rolling in. And then all of a sudden it dawned on me, oh my God, it's the aurora. And I was like, Johanna, grab my wife. I'm like, it's the Northern Lights. We gotta go.
Wow.
We were blessed with this incredible evening of just insane aurora borealis. It was wonderful. My wife had never really seen it live before, so watching her enjoy it was actually better than any photo that I took that night. But anyway, I'm down there, I'm on the beach in the dark, and a photographer strolls up to the beach, parks next to me. We get to chatting. Turns out we both follow each other on Instagram and both
Nice.
know each other's work. And so I spent my evening at that beach. He was only there for like 10 minutes because he was hitting all these other spots around the Lake Superior coastline there. But that was my last run in. But occasionally you do. I've met some folks who I've stayed in touch with in like the Great Smoky Mountains National
Yeah.
Park, some wildlife photographers who I'm just in awe of. I love wildlife photographers. I don't know how they do what they do. I've met a lot of those folks who
They're a
I
special
met some
breed.
people. They're incredible. Yeah, the patience that I just don't have. And also the knowledge to figure out tracking abilities. I'm like, what are you guys doing? This is crazy. So, yeah, and I met another incredible photographer named Anna who goes by the handle Jackson Hole Wild Heart, I believe.
Okay.
She's terrific. Wildlife photographer from the Grand Tetons in Wyoming. Fantastic person too. Yeah, yeah.
What does your processing look like? Are you straight into it when you get back, or do you leave things to marinate for a bit, or one that sort of swaps and changes between the two sort of spectrums or ends of the spectrum?
I think that I've become more of a let's wait and let's take our time with these things. And it was actually, I think it was like Mark Denny actually when he was doing a bit of like a Lightroom tutorial that I saw years and years ago. He was like, do yourself a favor, do like three edits, do three passes at an image, and then just leave them and walk away and take however much time you want, but walk away and then come back. He's like, I've always found that the first pass I do is always my favorite. And then I go too far. So I do try to just take my time a little bit. I did race out a few images when I got back from Utah because of the two guys that I went there with in Arches. They just started posting, and I was like, shit, I gotta share. But I do, I think it was one of those guys from Utah that I met up with, Joseph Cole, who's a terrific photographer as well. He told me that he was talking to another photographer who's like, "Oh, I don't look at anything I've shot for 7 months. I just do not even, I don't even put it in. I don't upload a thing to Lightroom. I just leave it."
Yeah, wow.
I don't know that I've got that sounds like a person who's a pro who's got a nice library that's filled to the
Yeah,
brim. I don't have that, so I can't wait 7 months. So I definitely take a look, but I haven't found the pressure cooker as much, isn't as intense these days
yeah,
anymore. Maybe I'm just trying to take my time so that I love what I'm sharing enough to share it. Otherwise, I'm not, I'm very guilty of posting some things and then not liking them and just pulling it. I just yank them. I'm like, ah,
yeah,
this is crap.
yeah. No, fair enough.
Yeah.
What do you do if you hit a creative wall or a creative block? Have you ever had that experience? And if so, do you have any strategies for getting around it?
Yeah, I do have, I think that one of the things I think if you have creative block or if you're just hitting a rut and you find yourself just doing the same thing and getting no joy out of it, then give yourself a project or give yourself a challenge. And I think that's a really easy one to do. I love landscape photography, but if I'm in a rut, you know what I'll do? I'll make myself just go for a walk with no game plan. I will just walk in the woods and I'll bring a camera, but it's not necessary. For me, it's just about remembering nature and what the gift is that it's giving you. Forget about photography for a minute and just go outside if you can and just reset your brain. And I think that, yeah, I found that really helpful. And sometimes you do walk away with images that you just didn't think you would like. And I think that's another thing that's pretty cool about going out without a plan is that you let instinct and impulse take over a little bit more.
Sure.
Um, it's also a fun chance to do just like smaller studies of things rather
Yeah,
than like, all right, I got to go to this location. Let's get up at 4:30 a.m. to be there by 5:10 to set up, to figure out make sure we're locked in on our composition. Let's wait for the light.
yeah,
That's a symphony and that's orchestrating a shot. But when you go out with the freedom of just not really giving a shit, oh, that's so wonderful. And I
yeah.
love that experience because you do surprise yourself. Yeah. And I think that hopefully answers the question.
Okay, definitely. We talked a little bit about where society is with photography or where photography's place is in society a bit earlier. What do you see as its future?
I can tell you what I hope for the future of
What?
photography. And I think that we've seen cycles like this in the past where we do see it quite often, quite a bit, excuse me, with photography as well. But I love, and I think I've lived long enough to know that what's old is new again all the
Yep.
time. And I think that we're going through, there was a lot of alarm about AI and, oh, what's to happen? And I think that actually like we just have to look at it as a tool and maybe an ally at times rather than an enemy. Because I'm not willing to fall on my sword for anything these days. That's one thing I've learned. I don't like AI in my work because I'd rather have it look a little gnarly than uber clean it where it looks like, oh,
Yeah.
this doesn't look real. But I'm not against it in any way. But I do think that like what happens so often with the music industry, we go through these phases and all of a sudden it's not only are the 80s sounds back, we've got synth everywhere. People
Yeah.
are buying vinyl again. That's awesome. I love those cycles. And we go through these phases of something's really hot. Oh my God, it's ICM. We're going to do some ICM right now. And then it's,
Yeah.
oh, that's another cool tool that maybe I'll use later on.
It's
But
like most trends. A lot of people jump on them. It then becomes so that everybody goes, ah, that's old hat. Let's move on.
yeah, yeah,
And
exactly. What's
it's
next?
fine. I think it's what's interesting is finding the next thing, and that's just
Yeah.
so hard to do to find a trend. I have got an eye, and I'm not going to talk about it because I don't want it to, but I have touched on something, and I've posted. If you look hard enough and you know what you're looking for, you can find one shot in my gallery so far where I've actually used the technique that I just don't see anywhere else. I'm not seeing any other people using it as yet. I'm quite interested to see if I can actually eventually make it a trend one day. But
Oh man. Now, all
but
right, I'm gonna go snooping for this one.
who knows? It probably won't be. It's something that I've touched on that I think is a little bit unique and not many other people do it. It's dead easy to do if you know what you're doing, but it's just something that you don't see a lot of. And that's the kind of thing that I'm looking for now is what's next.
Yeah. And I think I'll tell you like one, this is probably going to sound so trite and just an amateur, but I think that's one of the most important things is to try to stay true to yourself no matter what you're doing.
Yeah.
Um, and because I do think that there is a lot of flattery in the Instagram community where people
Oh,
just are chasing these Michael Shane Blooms of the world and they just try to echo and do repeats of the incredible work that he's done. And I think some of the folks that I admire the most are actually just people that you wouldn't know that just have an incredible eye. And there are some photographers from Minnesota who shoot these very like obscure, very timeless like just imagery from old neighborhoods, from old like mill towns and old. Oh, he's got these incredible photos of the county fair. And I'm like, man, these are so incredible because they just feel effortless. They don't
yeah.
feel like anyone's trying too damn hard. There's a great eye for details in the moment and painting a picture. And there is craft to it, but it comes across as just effortless, like these
Yeah.
snaps
Yeah.
that just happen. That's the stuff that I get. I'm like, holy shit. This is the stuff that really excites me. When you can take such an ordinary thing as a rural one stoplight town in the US and turn it into fine art, I'm like, I'm thrilled. And those
Yeah.
people are just being themselves. They're just in the moment, in the element, and they're just going after it. And I love that.
Cool. What do you like to do when you're not out shooting?
I think that most of my days of late have been spent very much in the outdoors. It's been a rainy summer in Minnesota, but my wife and I, as I mentioned earlier, we were lucky enough to we were living in Chicago and my wife did not like Chicago. We had this tiny little shack in the woods in northern Minnesota that we were holding on to and we were able to renovate it and winterize it and make it okay for the Minnesota winters. And we've just moved in. So we are enjoying like every little bit of this
No.
place. And we're on a little lake and or actually a large lake. And it's been summertime. And a lot of our time has been spent swimming, kayaking, canoeing together. We've got a bunch of animals around us that I feel like I live in a on a farm in some respects because I wake up and I'm like, oh, the chipmunks are at the door. I gotta feed them. And we've got some deer around. And then we of course have this fox that visits us that hunts all the other animals that are feeding
Uh,
on our bird. So I've been just spending my time like not only enjoying this place and this and my home and the wildlife and nature here, but actually enjoying my wife and the company that I keep with her has been just like the most incredible thing for the two of us. We're very privileged. We know it and we're celebrating it. We're lucky. So we are just like, we're giddy like kids. We're at camp every day. So yeah, just gratitude.
Delightful. Delightful. What's the best and or worst piece of advice anyone's given you?
For photography or for
It could be.
Man, I'll keep it focused on photography. I don't know that I've ever gotten a bad piece of advice, to be honest with you. And I guess that's one of the things that, and maybe it's because I'm just like self-taught and I'm never, I haven't really, I've tried not to be, but I also just, I try not to be influenced too much by other folks that are out
Yeah.
there and I veer away a little bit. Like I enjoy and I appreciate and I'm in awe of and but I've just been on this path and I don't know that I've never done a workshop. I've never really leaned on anybody in the field for anything, but I think that one of the things that I will say is it's not the worst piece of advice that I've gotten, but one of the best things that I ever did, and just being a solo act for so long, was going out with these two astrophotographers in Utah and
Mm.
just learning from them because they were like scientists and I was just a sponge and I was just absorbing everything that they were talking about. So that's a terrible answer to your question, I realize, but
It's an answer. It's fine. We're going to have to wrap up shortly, but I'm interested in other people that you think I should be talking to on the show.
I'm happy to send you, I could send you a list of some people that I think would be interesting.
Yeah, that'll be good.
Yeah.
Thank
There are some people that I have definitely who are not in the landscape world per se, but I think are well worth a conversation because I just think that they have gifts that
you. Yeah,
can relate to everybody. The processes might be slightly different between a landscape photographer and somebody who's doing fine art, portrait work, or cityscape work, or what have you. But I think that we're all in this together in so many
yeah,
ways. We forget that we are.
yeah, definitely. My last question's a thing that I've been trying to get to the bottom of for the last 3 years since I've started this podcast. Do you like pineapple on pizza?
I do not. I do not. I do not, but I know somebody who does, and she is sitting downstairs in my house right now. My wife does. Yeah, I don't know. I'm a New Yorker, I think, and like a New York
Pepperoni
slice.
onion. Yeah.
Oh God, so good. You don't need to mess with it.
Fair enough, fair enough. I don't blame you. I'm a fence sitter, I know, because if it's there and it's pizza, I'll eat it. But if
Yeah, I wouldn't shy away either.
all right, well, thank you very much, Tim. It's been really wonderful speaking with you and getting to know you better. Where can people find your work?
You can find my work. It's on my Instagram feed, which is Tim_Mattimore, Mattimore. And then I do have a website, but it's geared towards all my creative ventures. It's timmattimore.com. But you can find a bunch of photography on there too at much better resolution and scale than Instagram if you choose. Yeah. So it's been terrific talking to you. I've had a blast. Thank you so much. And thank you for reminding me that you were live so I could jump on here.
Yeah, thank you, thank you. It's been, as I say, fantastic spending some time and getting to know you, Tim. So thank you very much.
Cheers.
Thanks again for listening to Landscape Photography World. It's been wonderful having you listen. Hope you enjoyed it and keep listening because I'll be joined by some great guests in upcoming episodes. You can find my work in this podcast at grantswinburnphotography.com along with prints, my calendars and photography gear. I'm also on Vero, Twitter, YouTube, Instagram and Facebook. I'm Grant. Hope to see you out shooting soon. Don't forget to like and subscribe.